So I was bored and didn't know what to do, and I just didn't want to work on the Balkan Way because I got a bit sick and tired from working on it pretty much every day for the past year. When I'm recording this, devlog 6.5 hasn't even come out, so yeah. I thought, what if I challenged myself and made a game in just 7 days? The game will be a city builder set in medieval times on a small island, so let's start. What was the first thing I added on day 1? Camera movement. What else would it be? So I started with adding basic front, back and sideways movement to the camera. After that I added camera rotation. You rotate the camera with your mouse while holding the middle mouse button. Yes, I am fully aware that it's a pretty simple camera movement mechanic, but this project doesn't really need that much in terms of the camera. After that I decided that the terrain in the game, or the map I should say, would be randomly generated. So I decided to use the Parley noise to generate the map. But as you can see, the map is a bit small, 20 by 20 meters. So I decided to make it bigger. Now it's 150 by 150 meters. Then I added a fall-off map, which is a function I use to make islands. It just makes the edges generate at a lower altitude. First thing I decided to do on day 2 is I added a sprint mechanic to the camera because, well, it moved just a bit too slow for such a big map. I mean, it's not that big, but after the sprint mechanic on the camera, I decided to add a tree generator. Even if the trees are currently just cylinders, they'll be a big racers in the final game on day 7. I also added a grass generator to the game using the same code as the tree generator, which will be a racers in the game. Yes, currently grass are just cubes in the ground, but that does not matter. The last thing I added for day 2 is the actual city building part of a city builder, because, well, you cannot really build a city without it. So you can now place this red cube anywhere, even inside of itself, or the water. On day 3 I decided to fix bugs mostly with the code. But there are also some additions, like you cannot place buildings on top of the water or inside of each other. Then I made the ghost prefab not interact with trees and grass. I also made it impossible to place buildings inside or on top of trees. At this point I added some UI to the game, and that only includes the build button and the build UI. And the last thing I did for day 3 was making the user interface actually functional. Along with that I added 2 buildings to the game, a woodcutter and a farm. So, the game is not a game because there is no gameplay. That's why I added gameplay on day 4. First thing I added was a UI that shows you resources at the top of the screen. Currently the only resources are wood, thatch and crops. I also implemented that you use up these resources when placing buildings, and when you don't have enough of a resource you cannot actually place the building. I added functionality to the buildings. So the woodcutter produces wood, the farm produces crops, but I also added another building called thatchery that produces thatch. Also, the village house uses up crops. So yeah. Last thing I added for day 5 is an actual zooming in and zooming out mechanic. I was thinking to not include that, but honestly every city builder has it and it's much easier to see where you are at. The first thing I added on day 5 are actually 3 things, and that's population, employment, and unemployment texts. These currently do not work, but that's what I added next, actual functionality to these texts. And I added the functionality that if a building does not have any workers, it won't be able to produce anything. The last thing I did for day 5 is that I changed the amount of resources needed to build buildings, because honestly 50 tons of wood is a bit much for a medieval house. I started day 6 by adding a main menu and a map generator that's seed based. Then I decided to change all the cubes with actual 3D models for the game, and I also decided to go with a slightly lower poly art style for the game than the Balkan Way. So the game went from looking like this to this. And here we are, day 7. What a journey it was. This video took me longer to make than the whole game. But anyways, on this day I decided to add some quality of life changes to the game. So the first thing I added was the ability to rotate buildings when placing them, using the Q and E keys. You can rotate them by 45 degrees. I added an alternative to the normal village house, which is the longhouse. It can fit 4 times the people the village house can, but it's bigger, meaning it takes up more space. While the normal house is 8 meters long, this one is 25. After that, I added a small UI that shows you currently employed workers in a building and the production rate of the said building. And unfortunately, I did not have that much time on day 7 to actually add a main menu background to the game, so there's that. Thank you for watching this video and see you next time.